Before prestige television existed, Miami Vice changed everything in a single episode. It made a city. It made a fashion movement. It put a music track under a police procedural and made the whole country feel something they hadn't expected to feel watching a cop show on a Friday night. Miami Vice premiered on NBC on the 16th of September 1984, and within weeks, it had transformed men's fashion, reshaped what American television could look like, and turned two relatively unknown actors into global icons. But fame in the 1980s was a specific kind of animal, loud, expensive, and frequently dangerous. And what happened to the cast of Miami Vice in the 42 years since is a story that moves from psychic hotlines to Harvard-level acting careers, from a daughter who became one of the biggest movie stars in the world to a man who built a legacy so large that a new generation of filmmakers is trying to do it all again. Here's the real story. Number 1. Saundra Santiago. As Detective Gina Calabrese, the one who kept working. She was the one who never got quite enough credit. Saundra Santiago played Detective Gina Calabrese, fearless, sharp, the female anchor of the Vice Squad for all 5 seasons, alongside Crockett and Tubbs. She was already building momentum before Miami Vice. Her breakout role in the 1984 film Beat Street arrived the same year the show premiered, and for a moment, she was everywhere at once. But here's where it gets really interesting, because Saundra Santiago never stopped working. While some of her co-stars struggled to find roles after Miami Vice ended in 1989, Santiago moved fluidly through the decades. A 3-year run on the soap opera Guiding Light, a recurring role as Tony Soprano's next-door neighbor in The Sopranos, a stint on Broadway in 9 alongside Antonio Banderas, guest spots on True Detective, Gotham, Blue Bloods. She is one of the few members of the Miami Vice cast who simply kept going, not in a blaze of comeback glory, but in the quiet, professional way that defines a career. In 2026, Saundra Santiago is 67 years old. She continues to work. Most people who recognize her from The Sopranos have no idea she was on Miami Vice first. Gina Calabrese was always the one doing the work, while Crockett and Tubbs got the headlines. Saundra Santiago turned out to be exactly that, a professional who kept showing up, kept being good, and let the work speak for itself. But while Saundra Santiago built a career on quiet consistency, the man who played Lieutenant Castillo built something else entirely, because Edward James Olmos came to Miami Vice already a serious artist, and left it with an Emmy, a Golden Globe, and a mission that had nothing to do with television. Number 2, Edward James Olmos as Lieutenant Martin Castillo, the still center of a very loud show. He never smiled, not once. That was his choice, a deliberate artistic decision that nobody had asked for, and that transformed the entire energy of the show. Edward James Olmos played Lieutenant Martin Castillo for 5 seasons as a man who had seen too much and said too little. He won an Emmy in 1985. He won a Golden Globe. He was the only person on Miami Vice who seemed not to be performing at all. But you know what's even crazier? The decade after Miami Vice saw Olmos deliver one of the most impressive consecutive runs of any actor in American film, Stand and Deliver, in 1988. The true story of a math teacher who transformed a failing East LA high school earned him an Academy Award nomination, American Me, in 1992, which he also directed. Selena in 1997, and then Battlestar Galactica, the reimagined science fiction series that ran from 2004 to 2009, in which he played Admiral William Adama and earned a whole new generation of devoted fans. At the 40th anniversary celebration of Miami Vice in 2024, Olmos described what he said was the show's real legacy. "We created South Beach the way you see it today. Everything was freshly painted. Miami Vice was a glamorized and romanticized production. It created a style that went around the world, something that resonated throughout the entire planet." In 2026, Edward James Olmos is 79 years old. He continues to act and to advocate for Latino representation in American entertainment. Martin Castillo was the man nobody looked at directly, and everybody listened to. Edward James Olmos turned out to be exactly that, a presence whose impact on American culture runs far deeper than anyone who only knows him from Miami Vice could fully understand. Stories like this don't make the headlines anymore. That's why we tell them here. If that matters to you, subscribe. We're here every week. But the most tragicomic post-show story in the Miami Vice family belongs to the man who arrived on set already one of the most charismatic actors of his generation, and who made one of the most memorable career pivots in the history of American television. Number 3. Philip Michael Thomas as Ricardo Tubbs, the man who coined EGOT and then didn't get any of it. He was the cool one. If Crockett was fire, Tubbs was ice, the former NYPD detective who came to Miami to find his brother's killer and stayed because the city suited him. Philip Michael Thomas played Ricardo Tubbs for 5 seasons with a specific brand of magnetism that defined the look and feel of the decade. He earned a Golden Globe nomination. He was on the cover of every magazine that mattered. But here's where it gets really interesting, because Philip Michael Thomas did something extraordinary in the middle of all that fame. He coined a word. The word was EGOT Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, Tony, the 4 major entertainment awards, and he announced publicly that he intended to win all of them. It was an audacious statement at the height of Miami Vice fame, the kind of statement the 1980s rewarded simply for its confidence. But suddenly something happened, because when Miami Vice ended in 1989, the film career Thomas had envisioned didn't arrive. The EGOT remained entirely theoretical, and in 1994, Thomas became the spokesman for the Philip Michael Thomas International Psychic Network, appearing in infomercials with the tagline, "From Miami Vice to World Advice." He was eventually replaced by a personality called Miss Cleo. He won an arbitration case against the network in 2002 and was awarded over $2 million. He voiced Lance Vance in Grand Theft Auto, Vice City, introducing himself to an entirely new generation who had never seen the show. In 2026, a Miami Vice film reboot titled Miami Vice 85 is in production with Michael B. Jordan as Tubbs. Rico Tubbs came to Miami looking for justice and found something more complicated. Philip Michael Thomas found that fame was just as complicated and handled it in ways that were entirely, spectacularly his own. But while Philip Michael Thomas navigated the years after Miami Vice on his own terms, his co-star Don Johnson turned the same fame into something else entirely, a career that kept reinventing itself across 4 decades, a romantic life that became as famous as any role he ever played, and a daughter who grew up to be one of the most acclaimed actresses of her generation. Number 4. Don Johnson as Sonny Crockett, the man who invented cool and then had to live with it. He was the definition of a certain kind of masculine glamour that only existed for about 6 years in the 1980s. Don Johnson played Sonny Crockett, the undercover detective who lived on a houseboat with a pet alligator named Elvis, drove a Ferrari, wore Versace over a pastel t-shirt, and made 3-day stubble a cultural movement. He was so famous at the height of Miami Vice that when he pushed for a pay raise, NBC threatened to replace him with Mark Harmon. He won. He became, briefly, the highest-paid actor in the history of American television. But you know what's even crazier? Don Johnson had been struggling for 15 years before Miami Vice. Small roles, failed pilots, a career that went nowhere fast. He was 34 when Crockett made him a star, which meant he understood exactly how rare the opportunity was. He also admitted later that the lifestyle of the 80s took its toll. By his own account, he was a regular user of cocaine, alcohol, and other substances at the height of his fame. The parties were real. The excess was real. But there is more, because Don Johnson's romantic life became almost as famous as his work. He married Melanie Griffith in 1976, divorced her after 6 months, remarried her in 1989, and their daughter Dakota Johnson was born that year. They divorced again in 1996. He married Kelly Flegger in 1999 and has been with her since. Dakota Johnson is now one of the most sought-after actresses in Hollywood and has publicly inherited precisely none of her father's nostalgia for the limelight. But that's not all, because Don Johnson's career after Miami Vice refused to stop. Nash Bridges ran for 6 years, Django Unchained, Knives Out, Watchmen on HBO, where a new generation discovered him playing a character of extraordinary complexity. In 2026, Don Johnson is 76 years old. Miami Vice 85 is in production with Austin Butler as Crockett. Sonny Crockett was a man who lived on the edge of everything and somehow never fell. Don Johnson spent 4 decades proving that the same instinct that made him great on screen could carry a life just as complicated, and came through it intact. Miami Vice was a show that understood something television had forgotten. That style is not shallow, that the way something looks tells you everything about what it believes. It put a dying city on the map. It made pastel acceptable for men. It put a music track under a police procedural and made the whole country feel something they hadn't expected. The people who made it went on to define careers, endure setbacks, and reinvent themselves in one case by coining a word that every entertainment journalist now uses without remembering where it came from. Some thrived in ways nobody predicted. Some found different paths. And a new generation is about to discover Crockett and Tubbs for the first time in a reboot that proves the original still means something 42 years later. There is only one original Miami Vice, and now you know what it really cost the people who wore the pastels.